All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this morning. As we had the Trimble team talk about the next TBC Power Hour for September 30th of 2020. Today we'll be talking about utilizing the TBC level editor and walking through some features, functions, and workflows within Business Center. Next slide. The presenters today will be our applied geospatial expert, Daniel Butvitas, our TBC learning consultant, Ray Wu, and myself, product manager, Jeff Ryan. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about the agenda today.
Okay, the agenda will have some explanations and some notes before we get into the hands-on demonstration. And then the hands-on demonstration will be focusing on the TBC level editor. In the example, we'll have 2 files from a Dini, and we'll be looking at the import, edit, split, merge, combine, adjust, and report functions that go with the level editor. Then we'll have a small example of a GSI 16 file. We'll import that, show some edits, and then use the reset functions, followed by some examples of troubleshooting files. And then that will conclude the demonstration. And then we'll move into the resources and then the question and answers.
And throughout the webinar today, if you guys have any questions, just shoot them in the questions box and we'll try to get those answered. If we don't get to them today, we'll reply back via email later on.
Okay, in TBC version 4.1, we've included some level enhancements, and that was released in 2018 of April. The level editor enhancements added the combined level files, split run. A feature, a good feature now is identifying the point ID that is used more than once. So identifying the duplicate points that the level editor addresses. And then in the level report, decimal place options for the reporting. So just some notes here on just the field methods that define a level run, just different terminologies. Globally, people use different terminologies for level runs, etc. But we'll just kind of describe what TBC level editor follows. So in this example, we have individual runs. Run 1 is a level line, just a forward run, we would say, from the benchmark to our fixed point, then which we see is 191. To the next fixed point, we'd have another run, and then continue on, and we have run 3, run 4. And then in the sequence in the field collection, there is the end line function. So every run has an end line. And then in level editor, we'll see this later as well, but the tool is to merge the runs in the level editor. Next one is using closed runs. So it's a forward and back run between the fixed points. So in this example, run 1 has a forward run from 165, the benchmark, to 191, and then continue on back to the benchmark, 165 for just one run. And then to address this situation is using level editor split and merge run commands. Another example is just a continuous line starting at the benchmark, going through the fixed points, and then back to the benchmark. And this is the ideal situation that the level editor expects is one file. So this is one run for the import, and level editors set to for adjustment and edits and etc. And then another example is using 2 benchmarks, starting at 1, going through your fixed points, and then ending up on your second benchmark. And then this is another scenario where you have 1 run for the import and its level editor is ready to go. So those are just some examples of run when you talk about runs in a level editor. Then just
Hey,
yes.
Dan, just a quick question. Among these different run examples, what would you choose to use usually in the field, just to make sure you will have good reference to know if your run is in good quality or not?
So my preference is using the closed loop. So breaking the long loop up, if you have a long loop, is breaking up into segments and using the closed loop function. Because once you close your line, you can see misclosure, and that so then you can now gauge if you have a blunder or there's something you need to address in that scenario versus running an entire line and then going through the steps of troubleshooting a long line if something has happened if you have a continuous line.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is just the TBC supported the measuring methods. TBC supports the backside, foresight, then the backside, foresight, backside, foresight, backside, and BF. And no support for the foresight, backside, foresight, and the alternating methods with each format. All right, now level editor, and then the goal, what the goal is in the editor from the field to the editor is to create the final import run. So in this example, we'll see is we have 3 runs that were done in the field. Could be closed or open, but if we did open, we'd have another one to run 4. In this case, we have 3 runs that are closed. But the goal here in the level editor is to create 1 file for adjustment, for the least squares adjustment. And then to get to the final import of 1 run, we use the tools in the level editor, and depending on what the field collection method was, you'll use the merge run, split run, combined level. So depending on what was decided in the field, and then moving into the level editor to create that, create the final import for adjustment. Okay, and then moving on to just some notes before we jump into the demonstration is the TBC level editor. So you bring in your file, what does it do? The level editor just checks the file. It goes through there and it sums everything up, and then it checks what the values are in the file. So there's no recomputation of the height of instrument or the recomputation of elevation. So all I do is it's running through, checking the math and checking the numbers at the end of the file, and then presenting a warning message if there's a difference or if there's some other scenarios that cause the level editor to present different messages.
So Dan, just want to clarify here, would you mind going back to the last slide? Yeah, so here when Dan says the TBC level editor does not recompute, basically we're saying we do not change any raw data from your level file, but actually when we do say adjust the runs, TBC will still calculate the adjusted height or elevation for those points, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and so now moving forward is when we use the import command. An example, a Dini file. So if you hit the import, open up, navigate to your file, and then down at the bottom, there's settings. So the important thing, I just want to explain what this function does. So this setting is, it's a filter for turning points, for the points that you don't want to bring in the project. So you can set the point number, set the maximum point and increment, and so this will go start reading the file, and it will disable the numbers in the sequence. So this example shows we're going to start at point 1000, maximum point 10,000 turning points, increment. I'm just going to increment the point number by 1, and then it tells us that the ending point is at 10,099.9. So this allows some filtering of your turning points, and then it then kind of correlates to the field teams running the levels of where you can say, all right, your turning point number is going to begin at this, and then use different numbers for the fixed points. And then once you have this set, these settings remain the same until they're changed. Another one section in the level editor is this descriptions. This won't be used in the demonstration, but I just want to explain what it does. So the description, you have 3 options: create feature codes, field notes, or ignored. And this relates to the description box. Level editor refers to the description column, and we'll see that in the level editor here shortly. So when you use the feature code, it'll create feature codes. So in the description field, you want to clear the entire field. So it brings in the entire field from this example is a Dini file. And you just highlight the entire field, delete that. Then you can put in the feature code. And if you use a different feature code, then if the point's already in the project, you use a different feature code. Then in the properties of the code, you'll see the yellow caution symbol saying additional feature codes have been used. So this creates the field, creates a feature code upon import. The next one, what does the field note do? So in this example here is the first 2 rows are ignored, and then we go to the first observation. So for the back site, we type in what it is, turning point. The foresight, this is a fixed point, a control point. And then once it's imported into TBC, into the TBC project, under the level observation, you'll see the field note. So you'll see this note under the level observation. And then it brings in that information that you've entered in the description field. So that's what the field description does. And the next one that we'll use for for the demonstration is just the ignore. So we'll just ignore those because we already have the feature codes from other observation sources. Okay, so now we're gonna moving forward just to some details about the demonstration, some notes to just kind of explain what's happening. So this location is in my neighborhood. This is a school that it has been replaced, but at the time it was a good scenario to, hey, we'll just do some level exercises, establish some vertical for just a training exercise, and just kind of putting it into a practical scenario. So we have a site, and then scenario worked out. A benchmark is about 700 meters southwest of the site. So we have some points on site and a benchmark nearby. And this image just shows you the level route where the benchmark is. So there's up a street, down a street. So we had a nice little area for some practice. And then also we have additional survey work. We have some total station and some GNSS information in the project. So we'll combine that information as well, showing the level data and incorporating it with total station and GNSS measurements. And so in the lower left we see the benchmark location, and then we have our two brass caps that are on site, and we'll establish vertical on that, and we'll also, the traverse begins at point 200 and 201. We'll look at a point derivation report for those as well. So that's kind of the little background for the location and what we'll see in TBC. And then again, this was just a Dini training, so students learning level techniques. So the equipment was a 0.3. We used a foldable wooden staff, fixed leg tripod for the turning points, a foot plate. And then we combined some methods, just again for learning details. So you'll see we'll see a backside foresight and also a backside foresight method being brought in. And then the misclosure, depending on the requirements and agencies and all that, there's different ones for the misclosure check. For this one, we selected the 6 square root of the distance of the run, and then from our the level run, we'll see the misclosure was a minus 6.13 millimeters. Our loop was 3.94 kilometers, and that gave us 11.91. So for our general survey construction type application, our misclosure is in the acceptable range. Okay, and then following the demonstration TBC, we'll look at some troubleshooting and just 2 scenarios. We have a Dini file that ended with a backsite reading. We'll go through that and see that scenario where the field crew decided to end on a backsite and shut down and left for the day. But that's not the best scenario. And then another one, a Dini file that just has several duplicate points, and we'll look at the level editor to make those adjustments. And going back to the first one, to address that scenario, we're going to look at the DAT file, make some edits in the DAT file, bring it in the level editor, and we'll see a duplicate point. And then in that scenario, we can use the add line function or decide what we want to do. Okay, now we're going to get into the hands-on demonstration. Oops, get back there. All right, so here's our project. So with all our data and GNSS, our benchmarks down here. So our first thing is we'll use our import command. And it puts us in our location. And so down here is the import again. Here are the settings for the point numbers. And we'll import our first Dini level file. All right, so there it is. So here's level editor. So right now it's read in 3 runs. And then it's right now we're at the raw use the raw elevation, so nothing has been adjusted. Gives us, it's reading the file, the sums of the backsites, foresights, misclosure. So we have a misclosure. And so usually when we see an acceptable misclosure, that means we have a close. So it's started on a point, ended on a point with an elevation, the same elevation or a different benchmark. So in this case, there's the benchmark, number N165. We have the fixed, it's a control, the published elevation. And then we have the run name, and then the standard. We had a 0.3 level, and then no for the per turn. Use either one of those, but don't use both. And then down here in the lower left, we have just some visuals to turn on and off. This one we just disabled, turned off the description field. Create options, we want to prevent the further adjustment. So these 2 options, the allow network adjustment. So that's if you're going to perform the adjustment in TBC with your other with the other observation information, or we can prevent further adjustment where we're going to adjust it here, and then it's going to import in with the final elevations, and then it's this will not, and then this controls that there won't be any adjustments using the adjustment command in TBC. Then here's the description column we talked about before. We're just going to ignore the descriptions. All right, so in this case, in this scenario here is, now we can make edits. And then in this case, we're going to, we have some point numbers. We need to manage some point numbers. And for this one, number 125, that needs to be changed to 191. And then moving down to 126, that needs to be edited to modify to 192. And then third point, 127, needs to be 193. So now this is the feature as well with the revisions, is now we have a new circle indicating this is common, this point has been used in this run or a different run. And so this turns out this is actually the fixed point that we turned from and went back. And so now that's indicated that it's a duplicate point. The next function over here is we want to change 193. So in run 2, this was entered as a benchmark. So they went in, recalled it, said start here. But we want to change the status of this just to compute it. So now we're removing the fixed and just making it computed, because 193 was computed from run 1. And now we've changed the designation to computed. And if we look
Dan,
yes.
A quick question. This customer, Scott Sexton, was asking, why are we editing these point numbers? Could you explain the context a little bit?
So this is just the scenario is miscommunication. The points, so they brought them back in the office, and if the different crews did something different, so they just had different point numbers. So we're just aligning the point numbers with the field data. So the level folks who ran the level started in the 100 series, and then the total station folks who did the total station work gave them the series of 191, 192, 199. So we're just showing the capability of the level editor that we can edit point numbers on the fly to match what's in the project.
Does that answer your question, Scott? I guess we can continue.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, so now we're look at the scenario here is, okay, we set our import settings. However, we have some points enabled for import. And in this scenario is turning point was 1006. We went into this point. It was formerly 127, 193, and then our sequence was broke. So we went 1006 to 1008. And so that's why these are enabled. So we don't want those, so we can just uncheck these values so they won't be brought into the project. And then the next question is why is 1013, was that disabled? In run 2, 1013 was used again, but it was disabled. And so that explains why 1013 is disabled here as well. So those are the edits for run 1.
Dan, one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Jeffrey Goldknapp was asking, I know this is a common question, but can a save edit and undo option be added to the level editor? I think today we already save the edits automatically, so you don't really need to click anything in the level editor. But for the undo, Dan, would you mind maybe change one point number and do the Control Z to undo it? Is that possible?
That's a good question. There is I don't want to try that right now, but okay, we'll try it here because I know you can't get to the undo here.
True.
So we'll go just 1,000, and then if we do that, and then yeah, Control Z does not work either. So that would be a note for the level editor. Is where we make mistakes, having some type of undo in here. That would be good for the level editor, is making mistakes here, because the only thing we have if we make some mistakes is the reset button, but that takes us back to the start. So we're started all over. But if we made some mistakes here, it would be nice to have a little undo button in the level editor as well.
Sounds good. Yeah. So we can definitely look into that.
Okay, and so that's our edits in run 1. And we'll just click into run 2. And as we see here is, so this is the merge run. This is the important feature with the merge run, is where your benchmark ends. The ending point number needs to match the starting point number in your next run. So that's the critical spot when we merge runs. Okay, so here's the example of run 2, our 2 points, and then everything else, 10,013 moving forward. Those are already unchecked based on our filters, and run 3 as well. And so now we're going to, now we want to create that final run. So right here, we're going to, this is the first half with 3 closed loops. So we're going to find where our fixed point was. And so 193 was the fixed point. And we're going to select where 193 is, the backside. We're going to use the split run below option. And now that split the run up. Now we have run 1. And now we have a new run called run 1_1. And then in this case, we're going to just rename this, just for clarification, run 1 forward, F for the forward run. And then we'll go to run 1, the back run, and we'll just run 1 back. And then we're just going to repeat the process for run 2. Our closing fixed point in the run was TBM1. We'll split that. And again, just give this a name so we know, just a little clarification when we start to merge the runs. And then we'll do the last thing, last item for number 3 on 210. Okay, so we've now split our runs. We've renamed them. So now we're ready to just put this into the project. So we'll click OK. We're not going to adjust right now because we're not at the final import, because we have one more file to address. And we'll select OK. And now that brings the level data into the project. And now we can see with N165, it now has the square indicating that is a vertical, it's vertical control now. So there's a value in there that is seeded as control. And also now we have a flag on 165. It'll run the point derivation report. And then we'll look at the point derivation report in the list. So we have a weighted mean from a couple GNSS observations that calculated the northeast height, and now the point from the Dini file has seeded that as elevation vertical control. And then we look in the elevation column. Now we can see the differences. So now that file is that is the vertical controlled elevation, as noted up here, is with the triangle, so it's a control. And now the difference between the GNSS and the seated vertical the vertical posted vertical elevation. And then we have that. So now we'll move forward with the next file. And again, our settings remain the same. And now we've imported another file using the first file was backside foresight. Now we'll see this case, we have two backsights, two foresights. So we've just done a different method of field collection. And now in the same scenario here, we have to just make some edits. Different point numbers were used. And our first point. And then once we 210, so 210, we close the loop on 210. And then once we change the point number and it prompts us, do you want to rename all observations? In this scenario, yes, we'd like to change all the observations because we used 210 for the closing.
Hey,
The
Dan,
next one, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. One more question about the point IDs. So Sam Walker was asking the points that are ignored and not brought into the project. Can they be alphanumeric?
So yes, they can in the editor, they can. And then that just goes back to also the type of level as well. Does it support alphanumeric? But yes, these can be, the point IDs can be alphanumeric.
Thank you.
All right, so in this scenario here is we just started on in the field. They just entered 100. They didn't have the elevation. So 210's already in the project. We've also used it in our for our original run. But now in the elevation type, we want to set it to coordinate. So we're going to use the elevation of 210 from our previous level. So now we've changed it from just the random entered. Now we're using a value from the file. And then also, once again, just some few additional point numberings to address. And we've addressed those. And there's our traverse points. And again, here's our misclosure. And now again, we've made our edits. We want to bring the file in to TBC. And we'll click OK. Cancel. And in that case, okay, I did one minor mistake. I canceled the import. I want to prevent. So we'll just bear with me as we make the same edits. Coordinate, because that defaults to allow network adjustment. And there we go. Oops. 8. Okay, so now I got the right setting. We'll select OK. Okay, so now that brings that file in. So now we're at that scenario where we have 2 level files, but we want to get down to our ultimate 1 file. So in this scenario, we'll use the combined level option. And then we're going to select our 2 files. And then we want to say which one is the target one we want to move into. So everything's going to move into file number 1. Now we have our first run, as we've seen, all split up. And then we have run 1 back here, the next run. So now we just need to make these all into 1 run. So we're going to use our merge run option. We'll select merge run. We're just going to give it a name, final import. And we just go down the list, forward run into run 2. And they all have the same starting and ending point, because if they didn't, you get a message. And we just repeat the process, final import, run into 3F. And then we'll merge run, and now we're going to go into run 1. And now we'll just head back using the reverse. All right, now we've created our final import. We've created one loop. So we've taken several little loops, and now we've created the final import with one loop. There's our final misclosure. We're going to prevent adjustments, and we're at the stage now to make the final adjust the run. So we select our final import. Now we look at, we have a raw elevation, our correction column, and the adjusted elevation based on N165, the benchmark. And then we go through, and it notes each turning point, the fixed points that were used. And once we have it adjusted, we can review, see if we have any corrections that may stand out. And once we review that, we're ready to actually import the final into TBC. And now if we look at our points 199, 193, the ones we assigned, they are now also now labeled as vertical control.
Hey, Dan, if you don't mind reopening the level editor. We noticed that you changed one of those elevations from benchmark type to coordinates. Would you further explain why you did that?
Okay.
This is a question from Mustafa.
Okay. All right. So right here at 193, let's see 193. So here we have, so it's a final import. So what happened is during run 1, going from N165, we went to 193, and then we closed back on 165. So the next day the level started at 193, but they keyed in the raw elevation. So when that comes in the TBC in the level editor, now that says, oh, that's a fixed. That's how it treated it, is as a benchmark. Once you said, okay, I'm starting level line number 2, here's the elevation. So it came in as benchmark, but we didn't want to use it as benchmark. So we want to continue on our level and we want to adjust it. So that's why we brought it back to the computed status.
And also, sometimes when you used a artificial benchmark elevation in the field, say 100 or 1000, but you already have that point preloaded into TBC. So for example, you already have N165 sitting in your project, then you can choose to use the coordinate elevation type. So TBC will use the existing elevation of that point instead of the artificial one you set up in the field. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, so that described the second situation in our second level run where we just entered arbitrary elevation 100. So then we assigned it the coordinate for the point in the project. But for the first one, we wanted to use the elevation from the level information. So it continues on with the raw elevation from the first run.
So basically, if you want to let the level editor compute the elevation of this point, you will change it to computed. But if you wanted to use an existing elevation from your project, you change it to coordinate. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
When you select coordinate, it's going to pull it from the project. And then this one, it's pulling the elevation from the level file.
Makes sense. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dan,
right.
we had another question come in. Does the order which we merge the runs matter?
Yeah, it does. So in this case, our direction went up like this way. So you want to have it in the level order. So you can't just, but it also depends on your points, because so in this case, our first run went from 165 through the points up to 193, and we came back. So merging the runs is your starting point in the second run has to be the ending point in your first run. So those have to correspond to each other. And then also when you're running your route, those merging should be reflecting the forward run and the backward run.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, so now, so we're going to just step into the reporting functions. So we're going to look at the import report. So the import report, import summary. There's a lot of stuff in the project. So, so for the folks looking, if you do the line adjustment for Dini specific, when you do the line adjust to get your C value, it's actually recorded in the import summary report. So this is the summary of the import from the 2 level files. So when it's pulling the information from the level file, so in this address number 8, there's the C value correction. So if you have field crews adjusting, you're doing some high precision, or you need the high precision level, adjusting morning, afternoon, and then late evening, and you import the file. So this is where you can get the value. Another place where you could get it in the DAP file as well, but this also shows it in the import summary of what the correction was. In addition, it also shows in this address curvature and refraction, if curvature and refraction were turned on or turned off. So just one little hidden thing in the import summary report if you're looking for the C value that was computed from the Dini adjustment. All right, so the next one is we'll just step in and look at the report options. So we'll go into the report, back to the options, and then down here you head to the level report, and now this is where you can set your precisions to address looking at the rounding, because formerly the report was fixed to 5 decimal places, so you can set it here. And then we'll head into the level report as well. We'll select level report, and there's the HTML level report, and then you can read through this. So in the browser, so now if we want to make edits or get it into a format that you want to change the report, make some changes, remove some features or columns, you can right click, do a save as, and save it as a web page. And I'll just, I went quickly through that. So we'll save the level report as a web page, HTML only. And then in Excel, now this behaves very similar to our custom reporting, because we don't have the level report option in custom reporting. So now you can go through here, remove cells, and change cells based on this the Excel file. So there's an option to make a modification to create more of a custom report via Excel. Oops. Okay, we have that.
So Dan, I just want to add one more thing to that Excel spreadsheet thing. Sometimes we get this question from customers that they not only they want to see the raw misclosure and the total backside foreside distances, they would also want to see a threshold or a standard number sitting there directly telling them if they have a successful adjusted run. So with this spreadsheet, you can easily add your own formula or equation to calculate if your run falls into a tier 1 or a class 1 standard because you have all the numbers here.
Okay, and now we'll look at, we'll just go through 201 and 208, 205. All right, and we'll just look at some point derivation reports at this time. So 200, that's where the traverse began. It was established by some GNSS. We look at the elevation, then we look in the vertical column, difference of 2 centimeters between level and the GPS. Then our other total station point where the traverse began, differing by 5 millimeters between the two. And then our 2 vertical points, which was 205 and 208, those were the brass caps on site. And there's the level file, from the level file, elevation and height. And then the traverse, ran a traverse through them, 3 mils, 6 mils. So now we're putting data together and we're seeing some good results. Okay, so that concludes the importing Dini file, 2 Dini files, bring them into one, creating a final import, and bring it into TBC, and now we have our final verticals. Now we're just going to step.
Hey, Dan,
go
one
ahead.
more
Go ahead.
question from
Yep.
Holly. She was asking, when should the curvature and the refraction be on? I think it's she's referring to that import summary you just quickly show.
So that stems back to a field operation with curvature and refraction. So if you're using short sights, doing high precision, those are it's going to be negligible. But when you get into some high precision leveling with working in different regions, they have different constants for curvature and refraction. That's when you get into enabling that setting.
Does that answer the question, Holly? She said yes. Okay.
Okay. All right. So that's moving on just for a short, brief import. I'm going to change our destination. And so we have a GSI Leica file. So we use the import command. It sees that, but it doesn't apply the settings as a Dini file. So this is going to use the import editor. So that opens up, and then we go through our list. We have the Leica section. We have some StarNet, TopCon, some other formats as well for other levels. And in this case, we will just select it was done in feet, but we want to select 16. GSI 16, you see the information. We'll import the file. So now level editor opens up. So we can make, in this case, this is the adjustment routine. So we don't need this run. We can delete that run. Here in this situation where we have, again, now we have multiple point numbers. These are just turning points. So we can use the right-click option under the Create option. We can exclude all to clear the fields, enable the 2 points that were used as benchmarks. So now we have that run. Now, as we see, we've disabled all the other common points, and now we have to go through and make additional modifications to the same point numbers. Down here, this scenario is another adjustment, and we can just delete the selected setup. Now we're back here. So in some scenario, if we've made some mistakes in the whole bit, and we can use the reset, all edits will be lost, and you select yes, and now you're back starting over as well. So that's the thing. Nice to have the level editor if we had a Control-Z to just remove the changes, but this resets takes you back to square one. That was just a quick example of just a Leica file. Now we're just moving into the troubleshooting section. So now, all right. So now we'll get in. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but one more question from Dean Bauer. he was asking, do you have a way to enter a negative value in the Dini level for backside? He said he was able to definitely edit the value, but would rather set correctly in the field. I think it's more related to the field.
Yeah, the negative. Yeah, the negative reading. That's unfortunately a scenario the level editor doesn't address. So that's one for the editor as well too, because with the Dini level, if you're not controlling the minimum height reading, and if it reads enough of the rod, but the center line, it will compute a negative elevation. So that's the one scenario.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now we have here's a file. You've been provided the file. You're going to import the file. Select import, and you get this screen. This is the uh-oh screen. So at this stage, if this happens, select cancel. All right, so we cancel the message. We have a blank editor. We have the show bad runs. Click on that. So it opens up just kind of a disabled level editor. You look at it, okay, it's reading something, but I don't know what to do here. So close that, import the file, and now from the import summary, now this is where the troubleshooting begins. Error 1, nothing was found to import. Now it says address 104 run 1 was not completed, so it wasn't imported. So now you have a good starting point. And unfortunately, this situation is we have to go back into the Dini file to start taking a look. Let's see, so minimize that. And then we'll look at so here we look at the file. It says address 104. We go to the bottom, and then, that's the scenario. This is the scenario of the field crew ran all these, this level line and did a backsite and stopped for the day. So that's a bad situation. But now it's like, how do we get this? Because it turns out this was over just the backsite and foresight, 6,000 feet on backsites and foresight. So they ran almost that's a little over 2 miles. No, that's 2 miles. Yeah, 2 miles, 2 miles backside foresights. And that's a lot of data that we just don't want to say, hey, you got to go back and re-level this entire 2 miles of levels. So this is where understanding the level file, the user guide kind of explains this format. So in this case, so from this case, what we had to do is add a block of information of how when the Dini ends a line, and enter information so it can read it. So what we had to do is remove the backsite reading. So now we're ending on the foresight. Added this specific information, the SH, and then so on the Dini is when you just hit the end line with no benchmark. All it does is takes the last Z elevation, compares it to the first. So then you can just add those two as the SH and DZ, and then do some manual computations, adds all the backsites and foresight distances, add that information, and now we have a file. We've made some corrections. We've saved the data so we can get it into TBC. And we'll import our modified file. And now we're back into a happy scenario where now we have to address a duplicate point. So now we're in the scenario where we can use the insert setup. So now we can key in that backsite, key in foresights. Now we can key in a portion, or we now go back to the level, start a new line. Back, if this was a fixed point, start that, and then continue on with continue on with the level, and then use a merged run. So that's kind of the large oh no moment there, but we're able to bring it back. Okay, so
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Several customers asked the similar question. If there's no XY coordinate associated to these leveling points, is there still a way to display the data in TBC?
No, yeah, unfortunately not. That would be nice to do it, but we'll just, oops, wrong one. Grab that. So you import the file. Yeah, so the only where you can see is in the point column here. So yeah, when it's only vertical only, you don't get a graphic display of points.
But here I would like to point out that, could you undo it? Although without XY coordinates, you cannot display it in the TBC plan view, but if you right click on one of those points and choose add coordinate, if you really want to just have a visual display of these points, you can easily put in some arbitrary northing and easting so that these points will still display on the plan view, if that helps.
And then the last edit example, we'll just go through this quickly just due to time, is in this scenario is a lot of duplicate points. So this is where the nice enhancement here is now B12. That's showing us. So now we can go through the file. Oh, B12. So this was a turning point. This was an intermediate point. So then we can say B12 fix, rename it, and don't enable observations because this was an intermediate site. So we use just the alphanumeric combination there. Then we can go through the file and just start addressing duplicate points with our warning message, so we can clean the file up for import as well.
So
okay.
Then here for the duplicate one, though you are changing one of those points because they are not supposed to be the same point.
Yeah,
right?
in this scenario, this is an intermediate shot, and this is a turning point, and this is where the level editor, the requirements of the level editor, you can't have duplicate points. The only time you can have a duplicate point is in the scenario if it's a turning point that's not being brought in, or if it's the start or end point, that's when it allows duplicate points. But you can't use the same point number for the different turning points.
Makes sense.
Okay, all right, so that concludes the live demonstration of the level editor. And now we'll turn it back to, there we go. And then I'll turn that back to Jeff.
Thanks, Dan. So next I'll talk about some resources and next steps for you guys. We just mixed up this slide a little bit to condense it into one for right now. So as always, we point you to the Trimble Business Center page where you can go and get a demo code and find out where your local distribution partner is, and then download the newest version of TBC if you haven't. So the newest version is 5.32.1, and also access the TBC resources PDF presentation. And we always update this so you can search for some help there. To access them all, if you're already paying for a license of TBC, please go to the support tab. This is a great function that we have in the ribbon. If you hit the next button, Dan, you can see that on the far right side, if you hit support tab, we have everything from learning materials, tutorials, release notes, working your way over to the resources section to access both the geospatial and construction web pages, our YouTube channel, all previous power hours. So as you can see, this is a good resource for you guys to come in and access real quick.
All right, so yes, thank you. Yeah, so for the next TBC Power 1.5 hour, we are going to kind of continue today's discussion on adjusting level data together with GNSS data and total station data. I've already seen in the questions pane that some of the users were also asking similar questions. What if I have level data together with some other data in one project? Or what if I chose prevent further network adjustment or allow further adjustment? How would the level data behave in this situation? So for next month, we will have this session together with Richard Hassler to talk about how to do a proper combined network adjustments with multi-sensor data. For this session, we will have a 1.5 hour discussion. So if you have questions regarding network adjustment, please join us then.
Thanks, Ray. And we're kind of short on time, but I guess we can do a few questions. Just so everybody's clear, we can get we'll distribute this Power Hour on the webpage. Just as I pointed out, you can go to the support tab and find this recording there, as well as the TBC webpage as mentioned. Let's see, what else do we have in questions here?
Yeah, so I think one of the questions we got more than one time was when we do all these edits in TBC level editor, where are those edits saved? Does it create a new DAT file? Dan, would you mind answering that?
No, it doesn't create any. It's all in the. I would have to kind of defer that one to Jeff on where, because it doesn't create a new DAP file. So there's not. So it's in the TBC project.
Yeah, I think I can elaborate on that one a little bit. Indeed, today we do not create a new DAT file to keep all the edits. Instead, all the edits will just stay in your TBC project. And the only way to see those edits would be to generate a level report. Eventually you could save it as a different file format and use it as a deliverable. But yeah, unfortunately, we are not going to create the exact same DAT file with the updated information in it. Stephen Witt was asking, could you also do the adjustment outside of level editor inside TBC?
Yeah, that would be the network adjustment function, but not specifically to level data. So that's when you're combining total station, GNSS.
And also several were asking what kind of adjustment were we using in the level editor?
And that was a least squares adjustment.
And does the adjusted elevation for the first point come from the Dini file itself?
Yes, well, yes, because that was controlled by the user. The user entered that. That was a published elevation. Yes, that came from the Dini file.
Okay.
Right.
All right, well, we kind of went over time a little bit. Ray and I will sort through these questions and get back to you guys. We did get some nice enhancement requests, so thank you guys for the feedback there. You want to hit the next slide, Dan? Okay, well, thank you guys all for attending. Really hope you guys found this insightful. We got a lot of interaction going, so appreciate your attendance, and we'll reach out later on. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone.